as the methane releases, many people might have heard that methane is 20 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. But in fact, that's over a 100-year time horizon. Over a 10-year time horizon, it's over 100 times more potent. So the magnitude of this cannot be overstated, and the reservoir that's releasing in the East Siberian Shelf of the Arctic is massive, and it has the potential to extinguish life on Earth.
It's a small world. It's a small world. It's all one. It's a small world. We're living in one small world. It's a small world. It's all one. It's a small world. We're living in one small world. It's a small world.
Dane, excuse me, I'm sorry. Before you get into that, could you just introduce yourself and tell us all who you are for the people who listen to the recording and don't know you?
Yeah, a little bit of a bio here. I'm sorry. I'm with the website geoengineeringwatch.org. Michael Murphy and myself, there's a few of us that are part of that site. I have a background with Bechtel Power Corporation in renewable energy. Worked on one of the first commercial solar plants in the continental U.S. My home was on the world's largest renewable energy magazine. That's how I got onto this issue. I'd been told about it, but it was frankly very skeptical. And when I moved to Northern California expecting clean air with a very large, completely off-grid home and started to lose on some days 50, 60, 70, even 80% of my solar uptake from these intermittent grid patterns, clearly something was wrong. Something was going on in the sky. Quickly came on the subject of geoengineering, and my life has been on hold ever since, over a decade. Prior to this, my area of study and research was climate change and the atmosphere, and that, of course, tailed right into this. And so this is the majority of what I've done for the last 10 years. Not a battle I wanted in any sense, but one I just simply felt if it was not stopped, nothing else would matter. I feel that more than ever today. And if on the temperature anomalies we see, I'm sure everybody's seen these wild swings in temperature, and it's very apparent now they are doing massive manipulation with the jet stream in conjunction with the aerosols. And my conclusion on that, and we can go into Q&A here in a minute because I like that best anyway, but I believe that the planet is in full-blown meltdown. I'm not an Al Gore fan. I'm not a carbon credit fan, but that does not change the reality on the ground. Geoengineering appears to be, from my research, the largest single causal factor. We've been not very kind to the planet. I don't think anybody can argue that one, but geoengineering is by far the largest wrench in the works that appears to have triggered climate feedback loops. One of those feedback loops is methane expulsion, which appears to be completely released or triggered at this point, and that in conjunction with the shredded ozone layer is certainly a result of geoengineering. We are in uncharted territory, and the methane expulsion is not a century-long event. It's not a decade-long event. It happens over the course of a few years, and all available data indicates it's happening now, and this is a global game-changing event. And the paradox is, again, geoengineering appears to be one of the largest single causal factors, the largest causal factor, because geoengineering alters wind patterns along with HAARP, which then alters ocean currents. Now we have ocean currents that used to turn south from the Atlantic before they went into the Arctic. Now they go straight into the Arctic. That's part of the reason the methane hydrates have thawed. Shredded ozone, another reason they've thawed. And so as the methane releases, many people might have heard that methane is 20 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. But in fact, that's over a 100-year time horizon. Over a 10-year time horizon, it's over 100 times more potent. So the magnitude of this cannot be overstated. And the reservoir that's releasing in the East Siberian Shelf of the Arctic is massive, and it has the potential to extinguish life on Earth, that reservoir alone.
Tonight, a community in the San Bernardino Mountains has a real mystery on its hands. The official explanation here is that jet contrails are causing strange lines in the sky, and that it's pollen making people sick on the ground. But others are convinced it is something else, and they ask, is the government experimenting with our weather?
Can a strange substance found by a southwest Arkansas man be part of a government test? Well, that's the question at the heart of a phenomenon called chemtrails, now getting widespread attention.
Reporting live in the newsroom, Mark Cota-Robles, KION 46 News.
So some folks are saying now, if I got this right, that the spray will contribute to the housing slump.
Yeah, you never know. You know, we heard rumors about those going around from Monterey County, and now someone's coming up and saying it in Santa Cruz.
But no word yet on its impact potentially on global warming, right?
Nope. Wait for that one, though.
We'll wait. It's coming.
Oh, it covered the entire Cedar Glen area.
A cloud of dust, leaving a sticky yellow slime all over her car. It happened again last February, and calls began pouring into the local Alpenhorn newspaper.
And they had a tremendous upsurge of children that were not going to school at that time.
Yeah. Clench your fists and hold your hands up high. Open your eyes and realize the lies that they try to manipulate our minds with as they fly. Chemicals across the globe up into our sky. Now clench your fists and hold your hands up high. Open your eyes and realize the lies that they try to manipulate our minds with as they fly. Chemicals across the globe up into our sky. This is a story about the government. How they spray us with toxins and try to cover it. This ain't a covenant, they just don't care. Ubiquitous chemicals polluting air, and we just stare, cause most of us don't know what the strange trails in the sky are when they flow in slow-mo as they get bigger. Can't figure this ain't no ordinary trigger from vaporized liquor. This is not no normal contrails from jet engines. These are inventions let off in the straight dimensions. We need to bring attention to these conventions where the leaders won't answer our question in a clear sentence. And the question is, why you spraying this? Harmful chemicals in areas with plain kids, places where no pests live. If the system wasn't corrupt, you would be arrested. This is an illegal act, it's in the Constitution. Private property abusing without a conclusion. Pollution distribution on natural habitats. We allow rats getting kicked like hacky sacks and graphic maps. Show stats, so all of the toxins that you gave us, you can straight up have them back. Now relax, sit back. Have you ever heard of its facts? How these tracks in the sky can be murderous acts. Now I'm just trying to get the point raised. From Point Reyes to Monterey and across the bay, where they drop the spray, trying to pop the prey. Your undeniable facts show that this is not the way. Known for over a century, the light brown apple moth from New Zealand and Australia spread eventually. And apparently it's intentionally meant to be a pest, fundamentally sent to eat the best of the crops in California. Constant critical damage to planet gen economical pay. This is a comical play, this ain't the bubonic plague. Pesticide companies say we will lose money today. It's just an excuse to pay for the spray, because to get rid of these moths is easier in alternative ways. But instead they don't listen to the facts you display, like how the moth will be killed off by its multitudinous prey. But they just pay for the spray with millions of dollars into bottles full of chemicals sprayed from nozzles at full throttle today and all day tomorrow. Through a sorrow we follow into the world that's turned hollow. This is the America we be, the soil of freshness, the vision of the sea. The freedom of the people will no longer be free when the atmosphere weeps at the gases that we leave. Yeah, clench your fists and hold your head up high. Open your eyes and realize the lies that they try to manipulate our minds with as they fly. Chemicals across the globe up into our sky. Now clench your fists and hold your hands up high. Open your eyes and realize the lies that they try to manipulate our minds with as they fly. Chemicals across the globe up into our sky.
There are chemicals in Checkmate that can cause breast cancer. You're now spraying me with a chemical that can cause it? That's not right to me or to anybody.
Hopefully this is a lame rumor, not a shock until you wake up popping pills in a hospital with a brain tumor or something else lunar. Cause the best answer for breast cancer has laid in the consumer who consumes pesticides into the system, now becoming a victim of rapid soul division. Please just listen, because all we are wishing is that you conduct tests for your spray and display its health condition. But they don't seem this is a state of emergency. A little pest that barely affects anything permanently, yet urgently they just continue with expedients, turning our fresh air into virulent ingredients. Obedience is needed to rid this death scare. Hold up, let me take my last breath of fresh air.
So again, the paradox is the more they spray, the more they apparently feel they have to spray in order to cover up the damage they've already done. It's painting us straight into a corner, but it's all they know how to do. It's all they're geared to do. It's what their money-making bonanza is. So anyway, I feel at this point, and I'll go into Q&A here in a second, that we are really at the apex here, and the temperatures are changing radically. There's temperatures in some places in the Arctic right in the last 30, 45 days that have been 50 degrees above normal. And there's huge swings. There's other areas that have been below normal, like Alaska. But it just depends on where they're ice nucleating, which, if anybody doesn't know what that is, it appears that almost every precipitation event now is being ice nucleated. That's chemical nucleation. It's a chemical process by which snow can be created at, according to the patents we have, of up to 50 degrees. We see the same thing happening on the ground. Shouldn't be snowing at those temperatures, obviously, but as this nucleation process continues, it appears to cool the air mass below it temporarily. And in Northern California, we had temperatures as low as 20 degrees below some 2-3 weeks back, not far from where I live, and now we're up pushing 80 degrees. And same thing, Atlanta, a little over a week ago, Atlanta, Georgia was 85 degrees. It snowed 3 days later. People should really question this, obviously, and the nucleation process appears to be their last card. We don't know what's in these chemicals. We're seeing very anomalous snow that stays frozen, and ponds that are packed with this stuff that stay frozen long after freezing temperatures are gone. The chemical nucleation process appears to continue on, actually gassing some of the water out of those ponds. They're doing over Siberia right now, is completely buried in snow. The radar, we can see them ice nucleating. You can see what was a rain cell that flashes out the snow as it's got this material dumped on it. So anyway, I'll go to Q&A, but I believe right now that what they have triggered is so cataclysmic, and paleo data backs this up, paleoclimatic data, that they now are in total desperation trying to cover up what they've helped to cause. And now the stakes are as high as they could be. And even to put this in perspective, the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, AMEG is the acronym, a lot of geoscientists there, Ken Caldera is one, if anybody's familiar with his name, but their latest proposals to stop this methane are to use the ionosphere heaters, which are the HAARP facilities around the globe, and try to use opposing frequencies to nuke the atmosphere in a desperate and completely destructive attempt to degrade the methane before it completely saturates the atmosphere. So this is total desperation mode, and I think that we're all in for quite a ride from here. But my belief from all my research is that if they don't stop geoengineering, if they don't allow the planet to respond, if they don't allow the hydrological cycle to resume, quit poisoning the boreal forests, quit shredding the ozone layer, if they don't allow the planet to respond on its own, I believe our future looks bleak indeed.
This morning the sky, it was blue, but now it's turned to gray, overcast. I see the reflection in your eyes as they do a 10-mile high drive. Hush now, baby, don't you cry as Grandmommy's singing you lullaby. She says, don't worry, baby, someday soon we're gonna eat the rich. The Secretary of Defense may conduct biological experiments. I guess Granny never told you sometimes life can be a bitch.
Dane, it was just a couple months ago I first heard about the methane issue. I'd never heard that before. And could you explain how that works to people who've never heard about that? I think a lot of people have not even heard about that before. Methane, I mean, how is the spraying actually facilitating the methane release in a positive feedback cycle?
Again, you know, I can't, in good conscience, hang it completely around the neck of geoengineering. I mean, we certainly have done great harm to our planet. But that being said, it does appear that geoengineering is the single greatest causal factor. Again, there are certain issues that are crystal clear scientifically. The geoengineering particulates shred ozone, period. There is absolutely no debate scientifically about that fact. We have massive northern and southern hemisphere ozone holes. Really all available data points toward geoengineering being the cause, not CFCs, not chlorofluorocarbons, but geoengineering, as they've been at this for about 6 decades, and that's about the time the ozone holes, really, southern hemisphere started to develop, northern hemisphere shortly after. And so you have more of the sun's thermal energy penetrating the atmosphere now. You have, although they can create, and they do, with between HAARP maneuvering the jet stream and the ice-nucleated particulates and the simple blocking of the sun, they can and do create massive cooling events over huge areas. But it absolutely appears to be at the cost of a much worsened overall warming. So it truly is cutting your nose off to spite your face. And as they alter, as I mentioned earlier, they alter wind currents, which alters ocean currents. Now you have warm water going to the Arctic. Methane is the greatest source of carbon that has the potential to release from the atmosphere, bar none. And this one reservoir alone in the East Siberian Shelf is thought to contain some 10,000 gigatons of methane. It's this frozen methane on the sea floor. If only 60 of that 10,000 gigatons released, that would increase by 400% the total greenhouse gas to date. Only 60 of that 10,000. So you can get an idea of the magnitude. If any significant percentage of that reservoir releases, it's game over on planet Earth.
This is inevitably military or something going on. The government, the Air Force, they send out what's known as chaff, and it's a way to experiment with the radar systems. And when you see this kind of a pattern like this, you can rest assured there's something going on. They're actually little bitty magnetic and little bitty strips of, whether it's aluminum, they change it, but what happens is the radar deflects off of all these little pieces.
And the number one reason you should visit New Zealand.
We have chemtrails too, just like America.
There is a growing citizens movement demanding an explanation of chemtrails.
And I talked to my NSA buddies at Fort Carson, Peterson Air Force Base, and Buckley, where I was actually their doctor taking care of the pilots flying and spraying the chemtrails. So I know it's real. If anybody says it's not real, they're full of it.
We taste and smell it. Trace elements collated, scientific debates develop. Base elements is evident. Aluminium oxide and barium prevalent. A million crops died. It dissolves in water but dehydrates the brain. Wrecks immune systems, heart, lungs, and dilates the brain. Aluminium ingestion stands next beside ethylene dibromide, a banned pesticide. Other bizarre material analyzed and residue. Sticky microscopic polymer fibers and citric brews. Highly toxic biohazard pathogens and funguses. Operation cloverleaf, bad luck and water mess. Asthma, allergies, pneumonia, and bronchitis. Now breathing is detrimental for long life bliss, cause they spray poison through the sky to poison you and I. Poison through the sky to poison you and I. Who prints out blue skies with white masks and lies, canopies and grids with flight paths and lines. This crisscross won't make you jump. It'll make your lungs slump.
Everyone's acting a little nutty tonight. They were sprayed in the day like it's something they like. I don't wanna be right, but they got Luca. My lungs froze up, I'm in a doped up stupor. I caught a thought, woke up. Big shitty, now I see why they got us huddled up in big cities. Depopulation control, they had to make it so, but take it slow. 80% in case you didn't know. But I guess you would have never expected it. How often do you look up and think about anything connected? Your vision's limited, they're playing tic-tac-toe in the sky, the shit's livid. I never been discredited, look, it's blowback. Ready to go like aerosolized Prozac. Mayday, mayday, they're kicking our ass like Pele. I don't give a f what they say, cause they spray poison through the sky to poison you and I. Poison through the sky to poison you and I.
Look here, this conspiracy theorist thinks airplanes spray toxic chemicals into the clouds.
They probably do, Gary. What would you know? You haven't been outside in 10 years. Well, I saw one the other day on my way to Boone.
One day it rained down with brown as goo, and the whole town came down with flu. Is the intention to weaken the population? And why is NATO so deep in the operation? In a decade the US claimed they'll own the weather to be used in warfare or any unknown endeavor. Radio waves are powered as heaters at the ionosphere across thousands of meters. The temperatures of 50,000 degrees, reducing huge storms and droughts as they please. Mass destruction, taking away liberties. HAARP.
Chemtrails are being used in conjunction with HAARP. By spraying metal oxides into the air above enemy skies, then directing ELF waves from HAARP to heat those metal oxides, the temperature of the sky is raised to more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit. preventing the accumulation of water vapor.
Are we in denial or a comatose state? Welcome to the trial to own your own fate. Minds and bodies are under attack, and many other animal tracks have run into the trap. These hazy lines poison the entire food chain. This is the bright science new claim. They lie now about chemtrails above, but time will soon hammer in the nails of love. It's time to teach the youth how to make a new paradigm of peace and truth. We can resist most pathogens with boosted immunity, averting biowarfare let loose in the community.
We spray poison through the sky to poison you and I. Poison through the sky to poison you and I.
Down to the airport.
Poison through the sky.
Into a fast plane.
Poison through the sky.
Over the Alleghenies.
Poison through the sky.
Over the Great Basin of the Mississippi. West and still west to the cold, high stillness of the Rockies. Unseen disaster comes creeping along the wings.
Initially, enemy armies or populations can be exposed to, sprayed with, a very small amount of chemical or biological agent. The quantity of chemical or biological agent used may be so small as to be virtually undetectable. Following exposure, the enemy population may be targeted with microwave or radio frequency radiation in the exact resonance frequency of the chemical or biological agent used. The toxic agent will begin to resonate or spin and will react with much greater speed or activity within the bodies of the target population, similar to the behavior of enzymes that make life possible. This greater reactivity may be millions of times greater than normal and would behave as if the person had been given a massive dose of chemical or biological agent, enough in fact to cause death. Cyclotronic resonance of chemical and biological agents allows entire armies or populations to be destroyed with only minute amounts of the agent in their bodies if they are attacked with non-lethal microwave weapons afterwards. It will be impossible to develop and deploy such a weapon without first testing it. These tests are actually being done on American citizens in their own homes.
I don't think they can hide this for long. It's changing temperatures by the day, and I think they will try to spin geoengineering into some last-ditch save-all, and it's important that enough people understand it's not a cure, but a curse, so that when they try to sell this to us, people will already know better. But that's how the methane is released. It's been happening for many decades. Bermuda Triangle, that's methane release, not aliens. When these methane fields release, it aerates the ocean like a bottle of champagne. Ships have no buoyancy, they go to the bottom. So this has been happening for a long time. But the Arctic reservoir is very, very large, and it's also acidifying the ocean. As the methane releases, much of it dissolves in the seawater as it reaches the surface, and the oceans are acidifying right now at breakneck speed. So this is a multi-edged sword, and none of it good.
Okay, so to make this simple for people, they're shredding the ozone layer. More sunlight is reaching the methane depots or these methane reservoirs, and then the methane is being released, causing a further heating, which is then increasing. It's acting like positive feedback and just increasing the whole cycle. Is that basically right in a nutshell?
Yes, but it's more of the sun's thermal energies, not necessarily direct sunlight, because again, global dimming right now, another term many are not familiar with, is fully 20% on planet Earth. That means over the last 5 decades, 20% of the sun's direct rays no longer reach the surface of the planet, again a result of geoengineering. So, I mean, the amount of decimation being caused by geoengineering, it can't be quantified. Again, it's shredding the ozone, altering wind currents, releasing methane, poisoning everything that lives, the boreal forests, which are the lungs of the planet, the northern latitude forests, Siberia, the Pacific Northwest. I spent my life in the forest, and it looks absolutely horrific. I just came in prior to making this call, and the devastation is cataclysmic. And so now you have these forests that were the lungs of the planet that were a carbon sink that absorbed carbon. Now they are a carbon source. They're emitting carbon because they are dying. So, I mean, there's nothing that's not being harmed by geoengineering. It is harming everything. But the sun's thermal energy, Russ, again, it's not always in the form of direct sunlight. It's like a cloudy day on the beach. You can still get sunburnt. And another part of this feedback loop is the Arctic ice cap. Many people, the global warming debate rages on, and it really should not. Although there was a small section of Antarctica that has, in fact, increased the sea ice slightly, and that we fully believe is from ice nucleation, areas that it did not snow before, did no precipitation because it was too cold. The air didn't contain enough moisture to precipitate. Now it does have enough moisture. It is precipitating, and there's sea ice forming, but that doesn't mean it's getting colder. It's not getting colder. And in the case of the Arctic ice cap, it almost completely imploded this year. Media is not covering this. During most of the melt season, the Arctic ice cap was losing 100,000 square kilometers of surface area a day. Near the end of the ice season, the melt season, it was 130,000 square kilometers a day. It's not expected to last more than 2 or 3 more years. No ice. Again, back to the methane. Instead of the surface of the ice reflecting 90% of the sun's thermal energy, now the sea absorbs 90+% of that thermal energy. So add that increased absorption of sunlight from the open seawater, add the ocean currents that are now delivering warm water, add the increased thermal energy from the sun, from the shredded ozone. Bad mix, bad combination. Methane releases, causes heating, more ice melt, more absorption, positive feedback loop. Very, very clear, easy to understand.
All right, let me ask you some hard questions real quick, because I know everybody is asking themselves this, and they respect what you think, and they'd like to know what you think. I think. How long until this process affects every soul on Earth? How long till it's an actual, something that nobody, even the people who are trying to deny most and go on with their lives, have to deal with?
Based on the data I see, I don't believe they'll be able to hide this past the end of this year, perhaps not even that long. And I believe that the ramifications from this event are unfolding so rapidly that I feel it's certainly a strong probability that some event might be laid on us to just distract from everything unfolding. Maybe they'll start World War III, maybe a false flag event or something. This is purely speculation. I have no knowledge of that, obviously, but based on the ramifications of the imploding environment, and again, to put this in a little more perspective, Russ, the species extinction rate today is somewhere between 100,000% of normal background extinction and 1,000,000% of normal background extinction. That's between 1,000 and 10,000 times normal background. We're losing as much as 200 species a day. We are in the 6th great mass extinction on planet Earth right now, today, and you can't hide that for long. You have fish stocks imploding. 93% of global pelagic fish stocks are now depleted. 93%. Now the bottom of the food chain, mackerel, herring, those are just starting to implode now completely. The previous methane mass expulsion, okay, we have paleo data to go on here. From 55 million years ago, the PETM event, Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, was a methane mass expulsion event. And it's felt that there was about, it depends on what model, what study you look at, but as much as 70% terrestrial extinction and perhaps over 90% ocean extinction. So, this is no joke, and it's going to change. But again, if they stopped geoengineering, that is our best chance. That they can only hurt the Earth's climate systems that are trying to compensate for what's happening. But when they seed the atmosphere, they stop cyclonic rotation, they stop ozone regeneration, they thwart the hydrological cycle, they poison what rain that does fall. It's doing nothing but harm. Geoengineering needs to stop.
You said a word about the docks. Pelagic, is that what you said?
Pelagic fish populations. Those are the greatest food stock fish. The tuna, the mackerel, Those are pelagic fish.
Okay, so we're losing that on a massive scale right now.
They're 93% depleted globally already. 93%. I mean, the only reason they catch anything is because their fishing methods are so incredibly sophisticated. But you have the ocean acidifying at the same time, in addition to Fukushima radiation and 1,000 other things. But ocean acidification is happening perhaps 1,000 times faster than the Pedum event I just mentioned 55 million years ago. So we are on a jet engine ride to a whole new reality. And again, I know my message is very dire, my conclusions are very dire, but first it has to matter to us to try to raise awareness on this. For every single individual we reach, that has to matter in and of itself. That makes the effort matter. And two, no one can say how this will unfold. No one. And again, our best bet by far is for the planet to be allowed to respond, for people to understand what's happening, and not for these completely clinically insane people to fly untold thousands of jets around day in, day out, and completely thwarting all of Earth's life support systems. And that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, I have to say that I agree with I know there was just speculation about probably they may have a distraction or false flag or something that will distract everybody. That's putting all the pieces together. I have to agree with that speculation that's probably what they're going to do. Now, so by doing chemtrails, by doing this so-called geoengineering, it sounds like they're obviously making the problem worse. Can't help but to believe they know exactly what they're doing. What do you think? They know they're making it worse, but maybe there's some reason behind it, or any thoughts on that?
I think there could be a couple angles. I mean, I think that on one hand, they know it's going to collapse, period, and so they don't care. And I always have to bring up the issue of 1,800 plus nuclear detonations on planet Earth. I mean, what sane group of people would do that? I mean, exposing themselves absolutely positively, strontium-90 in all of our bones. Everything was contaminated from those 1,800 detonations, blowing up beautiful South Sea islands. Why would anybody do that? I mean, there's no sanity in this equation, certainly. But I believe, in having spoken to Ken Caldeira and having spoken to David Keith at the Geoengineering conference in San Diego, that from my perspective, I don't think there's a lot of rational thinking in this equation. Not at all. They live in bubbles where the consequences of their actions don't appear to be relevant to them. And so we're dealing with, in my opinion, a complete lack of deductive reasoning here, with no comprehension as to the consequences of their actions. So it's hard to say, Russ, but I believe also that the vast majority of people involved in these programs, the vast majority, have no idea what they're doing. They are being told they're doing something that's going to save the planet, something benevolent, something necessary, and those are the people we need to reach. Those are the people who need to understand that they are sucking the noose around their own neck along with the rest of us. And I would hope that once they realize that, they would refuse to participate in this insanity.
Yeah, agreed. You had mentioned, we can go to Q&A in just a second, but a couple questions I've heard from a lot of people. We keep seeing this pattern of everything is dying. I had 4 different vegetables die off during 2 weeks of intense spraying this summer. I have a garden. I've learned gardening the last 3 weeks, which I love. And all of a sudden, 4 different vegetable types they all died. And it came right with 2 weeks of spraying. You just mentioned you came in with you guess you're working with a dozer. You're seeing the decimation of forest. What are you seeing with the plant life there, and how is that going to play into this?
Again, the geoengineering is the elephant in the room. It's the main cause of decimation in many, if not most, forested areas right now. Back to the species extinction, as much as 200 species a day going extinct. This is the important factor of this. It is thought that 70 to 80% of those extinctions, plant and animal, are fungally related. So when you poison the soils, when you saturate them with bioavailable, toxic, deadly, heavy metals, you kill the soil microbes. You kill the life of the soil. And what moves in when there's a clean slate? Fungus. And fungus is decimating everything from the oak trees to the some of the conifers and and every other thing from top to bottom, including people. Fungal sinusitis, epidemic now. Fungus is a very slow, insidious problem, and it's absolutely connected. The decimation of the forest, certainly we're seeing die-off. We're seeing trees that are weak. When trees and many other organisms when their roots sense bioavailable aluminum, there's studies on this in particular, so I'll use aluminum as an example, but they shut down to protect their DNA from damage. So they don't uptake nutrients, so they die a very slow, protracted death. And in the case of the forest in the Pacific Northwest, everybody says, oh, it's just the beetles. The beetles are only a symptom of a weak tree, a tree that has been poisoned. So, all roads lead back to geoengineering. Again, if they had not been doing this for 60 years, I believe we would be in exponentially better shape. Now, it doesn't mean that we haven't damaged the planet. Again, any notion that that has not occurred is just not looking at reality. But geoengineering, I believe, the biggest single causal factor, and if they had never started this, I believe we would be in a much better position. But as it sits right now, we are in free fall to an unknown reality.
Okay, and you mentioned the biologically available aluminum. Now, soils naturally have a lot of bauxite, which they get aluminum from through manufacturing process, but that's completely different because that doesn't affect the plants the same way newly introduced free biologically available aluminum does. Is that correct?
That's completely correct, because this comes up so many times from these geoengineering disinformation sites and people, and that aluminum is 8% of the Earth's crust, and it is. But aluminum does not exist in the environment in free form, period. Always bonded to other elements, not bioavailable. It certainly doesn't blow around in the wind as they have tried to claim. When I first dove into my research here, I talked to a hydrogeologist, one of the first people I talked to, and he was aghast at the aluminum reading I had in my rain, and said, you shouldn't have anything, even 1 part per billion in your rain unless you live next to an Alcoa factory. Those are his words exactly. My first test in the rain was 7 parts per billion of aluminum, already very high considering where I live. Subsequent tests over the next 6 years rose as much as almost 50,000% from that already high reading to 3,450 parts per billion in a single rain event. I mean, this is highly toxic rain. Snow, where this aluminum accumulated off the side of Mount Shasta, has been measured as high as 61,000 parts per billion. And nobody's talking, and people know, Russ. I mean, I talked to NOAA scientists 6 months ago off the record. They absolutely know. I just had another meeting with the environmental waste in Northern California. They have, tests from the Sacramento River that are spiking in aluminum, but they're afraid to say anything. And it's like, everybody's worried about their 8-to-5 job while we're all sinking at breakneck speed into total extinction, literally. So I hope if we can reach critical mass, and academia knows. I mean, I don't think there's a meteorologist out there that doesn't know this is going on, or a biologist that's involved with any type of forestry issue. And if we could just break the dam, I think it would break from 100 different directions. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, gotcha. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Who do we contact? It seems almost impossible, You can't get the legislators or senators to do anything. You can't, what should be our next step once we're aware and, wanting to fight it?
Extremely important question. And I would say this, legislatively we will never get anywhere. The system's bought, sold, paid for. They've been setting it up for this for many decades. I think they truly believe they could carry this on indefinitely. It could not be further from the truth. So the entire system is rigged not to show these particulates. So we need to reach the people and not waste our time with agencies. And everybody can do that from their own home computer. Find groups that would care if they only had a clue. Farm groups, environmental groups, ADD, Alzheimer's, autism. Some of the big fishing organizations are wondering why their streams are all dying. The list is almost endless of people that would care if they had a clue. Get credible data. Send them a credible email with a couple good articles. I call these flaming arrows. We all need to be shooting these flaming arrows from our home computer. Journalists that focus on environmental issues to, but something very thought out, credible article. Cite for more data. Geoengineeringwatch.org. Our site is one site. Even get an address and put an article or two in there. That doesn't cost much to do, and we all, since there's so few of us, the best thing we can do is to try to start these spot fires with people who are absolutely personally being horrifically affected and would care if they really got it, if they really accepted this was going on. And to add to that, I would say they will no longer have the option of denying this, because I don't think this lump will fit under the rug much longer. So even if it doesn't start an immediate fire, it'll smolder there, and when they start to see everything imploding around them, I believe those seeds will find fertile ground. So we can all, if there's an organized campaign to locate groups, organizations, and individuals that would care, journalists, if they knew, and send out data. Just keep sending it out, and mail films, make copies of Murphy film at 25 cents a copy for a DVD or 50. Just continue to shoot out those flaming arrows. With the few of us there are, that's the most effective thing we can do.
Pay close attention to what you are about to see. These images will be seen around the world. These rats have been fed with transgenic corn during their entire life cycle. The tumors they suffer from are enormous. The study that revealed the effect of the GMOs on the health of these rats has just been completed. It benefited from exceptional financial and technical means. We were able to witness the study in its entirety. It lasted for 2 years. Following years of doubt and controversies, will we finally know the truth about GMOs? Would we then be faced with a health crisis of global proportions?
This is the longest, most thorough study to have been carried out on a GMO, and we have also carried out a joint study on the most used pesticide in the world, the Roundup, which is a herbicide. It belongs to the main pesticide category. We spent over a year trying to obtain transgenic corn because no GMO manufacturers were willing to provide them. This is because Monsanto requires contracts to be signed stipulating that the seeds must not be used for testing and an arrangement must be made prior to the testing. We wanted our study to be independent.
This is the first time that a 2-year study has been conducted on GMOs. And there lies the big difference. Furthermore, we tried to evaluate a maximum of biochemical and biological parameters with repeated blood tests, weighing of the specimens, and urine tests. We studied the hepatic and urinary parameters, as well as the blood parameters, all the parameters that can be studied. We also studied the hormonal parameters, which has never been done in previous studies. This experiment is a world premiere.
Up until now, the corn NK603, the very one selected for the study, had only been tested over a 3-month period, and that in a test environment entirely controlled by Monsanto, its manufacturer. Furthermore, concerning the Roundup, also manufactured by Monsanto and which is used for growing corn, only its active agent, glyphosate, had been assessed. But one needs to understand that the manufacturers, in order to enable the active agent to penetrate the plant cell successfully, use additives that are sometimes more harmful than the actual glyphosate.
We have 2 clear objectives. Firstly, to conduct the studies exactly according to international requirements, but making sure to be very thorough when it comes to analyzing the results. Secondly, we want to determine if there are secondary effects. The only way to do this is to carry out tests on animals and then to examine all the blood parameters whilst paying close attention to their organs.
At this stage, it might prove useful to know exactly what GMOs are used for. It is a plant that has been developed either to produce its own insecticide or to be tolerant to a herbicide, thus enabling it to be exposed to massive doses of it without dying. One can understand how GMOs could be useful to farmers. For example, they would be able to spray their entire field with Roundup, killing all the weeds in the process and never harming the genetically modified plant. On the other hand, it is hard to see the benefits for the consumer, who will effectively be ingesting substances coming from a plant that has absorbed pesticides. That is why it is crucial to test not only the GMO, but also the GMO with its residue and the pesticide on its own.
This type of testing had never been done before because the corporations doing the tests would do them on GMOs with the Roundup, which meant that we had no idea what between the GMO and the Roundup caused the pathologies, or they did them on GMOs without specifying that this was the case. So what we decided to do was to address the question, are we dealing with the effects of the GMO or the pesticide? During the last 10 years of testing, the National Commission did not envisage a pesticide effect.
Therefore, Europe does not even demand that chronicle toxicity tests be systematically carried out on animals, and when they are required, it is the manufacturers who decide the protocol to be used. For example, the Amflora potato was only tested on a group of 30 rats, 10 of which were being fed the GMO. The Monsanto corn was tested on 400 rats. 80 of them were fed the transgenic plant, but only 40 of them were then subjected to blood tests. Either way, none of these studies lasted longer than 90 days.
What is represented by this figure is that certain groups of rats, male and female, have ingested GMO corn. GMO corn with Roundup residue and Roundup on its own. Every time we go up a level, a rat dies. The limit is 10 due to the number of rats that constitute a group. The dotted line represents the females of the group who die but have a completely normal diet. Only 2 animals die spontaneously after 550 days. On the other hand, every female that has been fed on the GMO with Roundup or Roundup diet has died more frequently than the other rats. Some will challenge the relevance of such results, but what is undeniable is that in the group that has been exposed to the GMOs, there is a 600% increase or 6 times more deaths compared to the control group. As far as medicine or biology is concerned, there is no need for further testing.
An important fact is that all the studies carried out on the rats are done over a 3-month period. It so happens that none of the effects are visible until the 4th month. This is fundamental in understanding that studies conducted over a 3-month period are useless. This conclusion is easily understandable. It could be said that their only use is to soothe the consciences.
Every rat out of the 200 that were tested was dissected by Professor Seralini's team. They did this to discover exactly what had affected their organs. The purpose behind this was to identify the way each diet, GMO and Roundup on its own, had acted on the metabolism of each animal, focusing on the development rate of the tumors that, and this comes as no surprise, only start to manifest themselves after the initial 3-month period.
This figure represents the number of palpable tumors contracted by the animal during the experiment. Here we can see the rats subjected to GMOs compared to those with a regular diet. As you can see, very few males have contracted tumors. This is due to them being more resistant to the testing process. What these figures show are the large tumors. Each step up represents a large tumor which can measure 17 millimeters by 17 millimeters. For a rat, these measurements are colossal. It would equate to a tumor of this size if seen on a human being. It is enormous. After having studied these tumors, it can be said that 94% of them take effect in the mammary glands, which would equate to breast cancer in a woman. We are faced with renal tumors for the males, but not only, some males also suffer from mammary tumors. This points towards a hormonal effect that isn't affected by the dosage. 60% of breast cancer cases are caused by hormonal deficiencies.
Professor Seralini's study holds one last surprise for us, and this is a major one. Up until now, one could have thought that the main cause of death for the tested rats was coming from the pesticide added to the corn. But what the study highlighted, and this for the first time ever, is the fact that the transgenesis itself could have killed the rats. What this means is that just by interfering with the genome of the plant in order to modify it, we are faced with repercussions that no one could have anticipated. This is enough to make us reconsider all the scientific precepts that led to the creation of GMOs.
Roundup had never been tested separately. Whilst conducting cellular studies, we saw that the cells of the liver, embryos, kidneys, placenta and the umbilical cord died much faster, and so we could deduce that there was a toxic effect on the organism. What can be said is that there is an increase in deaths due to GMOs and Roundups. The biggest surprise came when we realized that GMOs without any Roundup residue were responsible for an increase in the death rate of females and of some males. This could be the result of the GMO gene that has been badly assimilated by the plant and that has therefore resulted in a negative effect or due to a secondary metabolical effect.
What that means is that we are dealing with a GMO in particular, a modification of a cereal or a GMO corn. With regard to the genes inserted in the corn to make it a GMO corn can result in different effects. It is not because a certain GMO has a particular effect that other GMOs will have an effect, but some may even have more of an impact.
What is alarming, this is the GMO that is being eaten by the Americans, but also the GMO that has been approved for importation by European agencies, including the French ones, and that obviously contaminates our food.
Nowadays, only 2 types of GMOs are being produced in a few European countries. One is corn and the other potato. But what about the 27 million tons of transgenic soya that are unloaded each year in European ports? This soya is used to feed our cattle, but it also makes its way into a number of foodstuffs.
What we want to achieve with this study is a moratorium. The situation is serious enough and we're not going to eat everything and anything. We imported without knowing what was being imported, and the United States have produced crops without knowing what they were producing. There needs to be more studies of this kind, and GMO manufacturers need to conduct them before commercializing their products.
A moratorium on growing GMOs has been approved by most European countries. Now that we know the results of the study conducted by Professor Serralini, could it be time to extend this moratorium to all the GMO used in many of our foods? To establish an undeniable scientific truth, one needs teams, time, and means. Some will say that it takes too much time and that it is too expensive. But had we taken this precaution, could we not have avoided recent sanitary scandals? Will GMOs be responsible yet again for a calamitous scenario? And while we are waiting for scientific certainties, evidently, this is a risk we cannot afford to take.
Look at the people. Look at the people. Look at the people. Look at the people. Look at the people.
This is Small World Radio, a signal of love.